Hey everybody, you're very welcome to In Forest and Lands. I'm Joe Price, Wilderness Skills Instructor, and behind the camera today is Ida Olsen.
Hello everyone!
And if you're watching this video, you've clicked in to learn how to make the strongest bow saw you can make in the woods.
So first things first, when you come to the forest to build any kind of contraption from any kind of book or any kind of YouTube video, you need a certain set of tools, and it's always better to be looking at them than looking for them. So for this particular project, you're going to need cordage. I prefer number 36 bank line, but if all you have is paracord or jute, it's totally fine for this project. It's not really a structural component of the bucksaw. You're going to need a good belt knife of your choice, whatever you prefer, and you're going to need your 12-inch bow saw blade. But I'm going to talk a little bit about blades because maybe people don't own them, maybe people have never seen these before, and you go to Amazon or your local hardware store, Always Shop Local, and you want to pick up a blade for this project. There are 2 or 3 different types of blades when you get into saw blades, but you can tell almost instantly by the picture what they're kind of meant for. This is a dry wood saw blade, or some people call them an all-round saw blade, but this just has pegs. These triangular teeth are called pegs. So you can tell that because this is just a whole set of pegs that it's kind of going to do almost everything you want it to do. But then you can get green wood blades. Now these are more professional blades. I personally don't believe in cutting too much green wood when I'm in the forest, so having an all-round blade is totally fine. And for this project, I'm going to choose a 12-inch blade because I find these are a little bit easier than the big saw blades. These can kind of be a bit cumbersome to pack around. If you have even the largest folding saw, this is kind of all you're working with anyway when the folding saw folds out. So 12 inches works out fine. You can pack this in your backpack. I prefer to use these blades and have this type of project as a backup project. Should I snap my blade or my saw fail in the woods, carrying this around is negligible weight. You're going to need to put a couple of split rings on it too and have it ready for the forest. Now, what's a greenwood blade, I heard no one ask? Well, a greenwood blade is something like this. So you can see here the pegs. We have 4 pegs and a raker tooth, 4 pegs and a raker tooth, and they're slightly offset. When you hear offset, the teeth can either be offset to the right, offset to the left, or they've been cross cut, for want of a better word. If you find that you've bought yourself a blade, you've let it drop, people have stood on it, and when it cuts, the blade constantly wants to curve, chances are the teeth on your saw have just started to swing left or right, and they can be easily straightened up. Another video for another time. But as you can see here, once you know, it's very easy to spot the difference between a dry wood blade and a green wood blade. The key is these raker teeth and the pegs in the middle. It gets a bit more specific when it comes to distances and height and stuff and aggressiveness of the saw, but that's about where I want to be, a fine pegged blade for what you have in your haversack. Now we're going to get on and start looking for some materials. You're in a forest full of sticks, a stick factory I like to call it, but what sticks do you need for this project? So there you go, with the magic of editing, I've gone off to the stick factory and I've collected my sticks. I've collected them for the purpose of showing that if your saw was to break, you could still use it. But people often ask, how do you cut wood when you have, but people often ask, how do you cut wood when it comes to using your blade? Well, I've taken several survival courses and advanced survival courses, and sometimes all you're given is this blade. But if you add the split rings, you can place your finger in the split ring and hold it as if you're coal roasting. And you can see I've got no fingers where the blade are, and you just got to take it very slowly, very carefully. All these sticks were trimmed with this blade here, and you can complete this entire project. Again, why I prefer the 12-inch blades to the bigger ones, the kind of 30-centimeter plus blades that you saw me with there in the Agua Canyon saw, because when you use them singularly, they can be massive and they can be extremely difficult to cut with. So that's just a little pro tip on how you use this. You're only using the first 4 inches because you only need to cut sticks of this size. We're cutting sticks that are about thumb size or bigger, but thumb is a good general indication of where you want this to be. Also, as my dad used to say, it's easier to take wood off than it is to put back on. So an awful lot of people say that you should take your measurements from your saw and work your way up like that, but when I'm out collecting sticks, I'm also a lazy man when it comes to being in the woods. I like to sit around camp with the campfire, so I just cut sticks that are a little oversized for what I want to do, as straight as possible and as thick as my thumb as possible, and work our way up. You don't have to worry too much about the size of the sticks, once the sticks are the size of your thumb, this method will work with almost everything. In fact, this method here was created at the Wild Way Bushcraft School when me and Steve Armstrong and a couple of guys sat down and said, hey, we've got some absolute beginners coming and we got some pros coming. We have a big bunch. You can imagine when you're teaching a class, we had like 90 sticks. So then we had to make sure that the sticks of all different sizes, of all different lengths, would work with every student and every cut. And this is the method we came up here, and that's why I'm showing it to you today. So I've chosen my 3 sticks from the pile that I've collected, but at least now I have some emergency sticks. When possible, always gather more, because you're working with a live material, so you never know which way they're going to play. Having some extra sticks to hand is always good. It's better to be looking at it than it is to be looking for it. But this is our bucksaw. And this is where people maybe sometimes get a bit confused with the nomenclature. A bow saw is a bow. It's just basically a blade with a stick that comes over the top of it, kind of like the saw you're seeing at the start of the video. But this is a bucksaw, and a bucksaw is a square frame, so I just wanted to explain the 3 components. You have the blade, or sorry, the 4 components, but the 3 components of the actual saw. You have 2 upright arms. These are your uprights, and you have your cross arm, crossbar, cross member, call it what you will, but this is the construction we're going to be working with. So when you hear me make reference to uprights and cross arms, these are what I'm referring to. So we're going to cut our notches in now. If you join me on the stump, I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing we want to create is we want to create our square notch. This is actually the key that I don't see on too many bucksaws when they're in the woods. They're usually V notches, deep V notches, rounded notches, mortise and tenon notches. But when you want just a quick once-off project to get you through, these are definitely the difference in what they make. So I'm going to show you now how to create them on your uprights. So I've leveled up my sticks, and I believe in being all fingers and thumbs. They're your best measurements in the woods when it comes to projects. So when I sit down and I get my sticks leveled, each step when you're making a bucksaw is vitally important as the last step, because they all lead into each other. If you mess up at certain stages of it, you might find your saw would wobble, you find your saw may twist, it won't tighten properly, it may bend. But just taking these little extra steps as you go stops an awful lot of messing further down the line. A bucksaw becomes a project of compounding problems, I like to call it. So we get it level. I like to come up a fist and a thumb, and then kind of find a center point in the sticks, because I'm working with a lot of material here. So the most important thing is that I get my square notches level with each other at some point on the saw that's just not too close to the bottom. So I've chosen my bottom, fingers and thumbs, and then I'm going to give myself an extra bit to play with. I take my cross arm, make sure my sticks are level, things move. And again, this is why I like the square notch, because it gives you a bit to play with. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect watership tight. So I'm just going to press my knife in either side, make some marks. Lovely. And then I'm going to widen those marks, because sometimes you may drop your stick down and you may leave it to chance. It's why I also like to leave the bark on. Here we go, just double check, triple check, and things are where they're supposed to be. If you lose your mark, especially at this stage, just go back and give it a widen. Once you have it marked and centered, I'm now going to show you how to create the square notch. So how do you create a square notch? Well, quite simply, you create your 2 stop cuts, and this allows you to carve into buffers. I like to find just a rough midpoint, and then what we're going to do is carve almost in a pyramid shape, this way and this way. This is why I always leave extra room on sticks for when I'm doing notches. It allows me to manipulate it better. But simply keeping fingers out of the way and a thumb cut, you will see now how that stop cut stops my blade from travelling up the bark, and then I can knock it off. Then I can rotate my stick around, and from my center point carve into my other stop notch. Take those bits away. The wood that I'm working with today is actually alder. Alder's a nice wood. And then that's it. That's how you start, and then you just slowly deepen it down. When you're creating your square notch, don't come in more than a third. A very good indicator is what you can't see here is heartwood. You can't see the centerpiece. If you're carving your square notch and you start to see heartwood, it's an indication that you're going too deep. So you can take these apart lightly. So I'm going to widen this one, create my square notch here, create my square notch on my other stick, and we check back in a moment. So we have to take a little moment now because I've been eaten alive by mosquitoes and midges. So we found the shovel at the back of a shed here. So then we just created a wee little smudge pot. It's also great if you're making cinema on the fly and you want to mute the colors in the video. But pro tip, keeps the mosquitoes away. Smells beautiful too. So once we have our old square, about as square as we can get it, just going to give a few light taps. You don't want to drive it down in. We're just creating the split, which you can see starting to create here. And that's actually enough of a split for our saw blade to nest into. So I hope this gives a better look of how you want this to line up, because this is vitally important for when it all comes together. Remember, the bucksaw is a project of compounding problems, so you just don't want that to happen. And repeat on the other side of the crossarm. So now we've created our upright members. We're checking, always check your 6s for mosquitoes in the August months in September, because they can creep up on you like Spitfires in the Blitz. So what I'm going to do here is stop this check that we created. This is called a check when it's kind of coming through here. This is also a check. There's an awful lot of checks in the world of woodcraft, but you can see that we've created our split for where our bow saw blade is going to sit. But if we ain't careful, this split will travel up our stick. So we're going to try and stop that, or we are going to stop that. But what's known as a whipping, it's a single whip. And this is a great technique for any project. You know, if you want to make a nice walking staff, or, you know, hell, even if you're even putting away electrical cords at home, it's a nice way to tidy up things. So the way I like to do it, again, fingers and thumbs, is coming up about a thumb's width, which is about the thickness of our blade. I create a curve. You can see I've got the running end here, and the standing end there, and the curve is here. Now, there's several schools of thought on it. I like to go across the top because it helps bind it in a little bit more. Some people go across the left. I can actually show you that I can go from both directions on this, and you'll see that it's about the same. So first things first, you come across and come around. And if you want to see a more individual video on this, I'll get Edith to leave a link to our video about whipping in the comments section or in the description box below. But I've started here, and the key to this is keeping it all tight. You can see the cuticle or the bed of my nail here is changing color. Always a great thing to watch if you're watching people do handcrafts, and it allows you to see what pressure they're putting on things. Up, over, in, there. Now normally this is where people get all hands and thumbs and fingers, but a great trick that was shown to me was when whipping brooms and making brooms, the broom makers always stood on their cordage. This allows you to act like a pedal and also have a third hand to keep tension on your whipping. It allows it to speed up the process too, because you can keep tension. You can see I'm keeping tension with my foot, I'm rolling down, and I'm speedily creating my whip. Keeping that tension nice. I want to pull out a little bit of a tail here, adjust it a bit. Down we go. Down we go. Maybe pull in a bit of a tail here. Yeah, keep it out there. And then when it gets to here, you simply take a bit of pressure off your foot and you're able to reset your whipping and repeat the process. Again, the trick with these is keeping tension. It doesn't have to be beautiful. I could have cut this off, but this is only to stop a split traveling up. Pull it out a little bit more. See if I can. There we go. It's fairly tight. Now, when we get to about where we want to finish, where we have this loop, take your sturdy made belt knife, knock your grail on the ground, and what I like to do is cut a bit, leave a bit. Leave a bit for luck. Boop, and away she goes. Now, with this tail here, we are going to come around. Maybe we can get it twice. Yes, we can. We're going to come through the eye. So we're coming around. We're coming through the eye, like so. You can see how it is all sitting. And then we take our tail and we cinch that all down. If you're creating a really strong whipping, I recommend leaving this tail as long as possible just so you can get a grip on it or put a toggle around it. But this is only to stop our wood splitting. And you can see that's how we created it. Now, if you wanted to take this whipping off and save the cordage, you would leave this tail here and leave this tail there, and you can pull that out and the whole thing comes undone. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to trim it, because maybe you want it to be aesthetic. Turn it over here and trim it there. And we got our whipping. And this will stop our wood splitting further on in the project. So you can see now this is the magic of the square knot. I'm going to make this a little bit more flatter using my saw blade. But then it sits in here and you got yourself a good solid channel. But when we're going to cut this, again, there's nothing precise going on. So I just like to lift it out, get it halfway on this stick, and then measure about halfway on this stick. Make my forearm or my cross arm notch just a little bit wider. Again, remember, it's easier to take wood off than it is to put it back on. So just allow yourself a little bit for luck. There we go. So the next thing we want to do is measure our cord to create our windlass. Another great useful thing for building traps and stuff later on your woodcraft journey. But the windlass is what's going to take it all down and make everything tight. So a really quick way to measure your string so you don't waste your cordage and you get it right is start from this stick, pull it across to the other stick, then come back, take a pinch, move it across to the other stick, and as always, leave yourself a bit for luck. So to create our fisherman's knot for our windlass, we simply just put in a loop as if we were creating a stop knot or an arbor knot or something similar. Pass it through, and then we do the same to this, except we encompass the other line in the knot. Mosquitoes everywhere. You can see here, over the top and around. And before I cinch it down, you can see, and these two lines pass through each other. It's kind of like a friendship bracelet knot, be very similar. You can tighten it down. And the reason why we use this one for a windlass is when we pull these knots together, they really start to bite on each other. And they're super strong. You can put a double fisherman's knot in if you want, but I've seen time and time again at classes and the bow saws I've made myself that the bank line would almost break before these knots go. So there's a good strong knot, allows you to get a lot of tension on your windlass. But we are complete. And you can see, because of these square notches here, that this is rock solid. Rock solid. And these notches aren't exactly perfectly cut, but they're fine. I wanted to jump in and also show you a little trick just before the end. An awful lot of people tend to cut these uprights down, or they want to carve in anchor points or V notches or make it kind of pretty up here. What I like to do is take my bank line, come up about a fist, as you can see it's all fists, come up about a fist and get it about right and tighten it all down. And if it's solid, if it's rock solid, if you tighten it down, the bank line will leave marks on the sticks, or your paracord will leave marks on the sticks. So then you can unloosen it and you got perfect placement for where you need to cut your notches and where you need to trim this down. And then there's only one final test to do when you've made a saw. Let's cut some.